Hold on, brother, I'm talking.
What is up, guys? Welcome to my channel, AJ's Corner. This is a little brief video discussing the second fallout of a Michael Bisping podcast host. Basically, the show originated with a co-host called Louis J. Gomez, a comedian who, man, I thought they bounced off each other perfectly. They were hilarious. They were great. I mean, from the very first podcast, I never missed a single episode. And I've got nothing against Anthony Smith. He's a perfectly nice human being. But the day Louis J. Gomez left, that podcast didn't die, but it took a bit of a nosedive and took a while to come back. I still do watch it occasionally, but when it was Louis J. Gomez on the pod, I did not miss an episode because the guy was just so funny. They worked off each other perfectly. I think it's much better having a comedian and a fighter rather than two serious fighters, because I think they just clash more, whereas a comedian on the podcast works as sort of like a color commentator in a commentary booth, where they don't have to know exactly everything about the sport, but they know enough and they can just sort of make jokes and fun and keep things flowing and rolling and fill in any blank spots, and the fighter can give more detailed technical information. But it's very interesting. I'm not sure exactly why Louis J. Gomez left. I don't think we'll ever really know. But I mean, him and Bisping did have some genuine beef on the air on some of the episodes. But I think it was just genuine mate beef, like you have a real serious argument with your friend, but you're all good after it. Like that's what friends are, you know. And I felt like that. But I mean, I think Lewis did take his Legion of Skanks fighting career a bit seriously, and Bisping used to kind of shit on it and just laugh about it, and really make fun of it. And I think that really did actually hurt Lewis's feelings, which is a hard thing to do for a comedian, because I mean they roast each other, comedians. So I think you have to sort of tiptoe a little bit, because I think Bisping on that the roast Bisping was on, he threatened to get violent with some comedian. I can't remember who it was. I think it was a black fella. I'm not quite sure. But he was like, yeah, it won't be funny if I beat the crap out of you out the back. So I was like, yeah, Bisping, he's not a comedian. He's not going to take a joke. He's a bit more of a serious guy. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So he was replaced with Anthony Smith, which I thought was just not as good. It's just not as good. It's not as fun. It's not as funny. I actually stopped watching for a couple of months when Louis J. Gomez left, and I slowly got back into it. And I still do watch it occasionally. But I mean, like I said, with Louis, I did not miss an episode, and with Anthony, I was easy come, easy go. Maybe I'll watch it, maybe I won't, depending on what guests they did or didn't have. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, so I mean, people say there was sort of some trouble and tension brewing between the two. I'm not sure that there was, but I remember this clip from a while ago. I'm not going to give a shout out to someone called Ronan MMA. He doesn't need a shout out because he's got way more subscribers than me. But I actually did watch this episode. I remember watching this episode, and he picked up on it too. And like he said, and I agree, there was a few but moments where they were having button of heads together on air. But this was one of the ones which sort of stood out. There was others like it, but let's get to it and let's watch some of these little clips and see what we think. Let's investigate. So here's the first piece. Let's go.
Yeah, it sucks, man. Like career trajectory wise, I don't know, that might have put the nail in the coffin.
Sorry to pause it already. I'm not having a go, but that coffin was fully, solidly nailed in with a nail gun, super glue, and 10 sumo wrestlers sitting on top of it. That coffin was nailed a long time ago. I just want to quickly point this out before we get into it. And I'm not shitting on the guy. His longest win streaks in UFC was 3. And Elvis Mataptic never won a fight in UFC. Get out of the way. Andrew Sanchez, he was getting absolutely battered in that fight. I remember that guy was one of the Ultimate Fighter guys. I think he won the Ultimate Fighter, and he was dominating Smith in the grappling. I remember that fight. He sort of knocked him up against the cage. It was spectacular, I'll admit that. Hector Lombard, I mean, he'd come off the juice and he was just useless. And then he got bit by Thiago Santos. So maybe if that hadn't happened, he could have had a 6-fight win streak. This is the best win streak of his career. Rashad Evans, Mauricio Hua. I think Rashad Evans had come, let's quickly look. I'm pretty sure he was in a bad place, a very bad place. Yeah, he was on a 4-fight losing streak, and Smith actually retired him from UFC, so that's a complete worthless win. And he'd even gone down to middleweight, so he'd really compromised his body, like a Roy Jones sort of thing. I'm not comparing the two, but just saying, he obviously came back and bought that terrible taxi, literal Uber driver in Eagle FC, Khabib's defunct organization. And we won't go into the others, but Mauricio Hua was an absolute shadow of a ghost, of a phantom, of the former fighter that I used to watch him. That I watched highlights of in Pride when I first got into MMA. Pride was just sort of ending, and man, Mauricio Hua was a different cat then. But yeah, that win is worthless. That was a very good win, especially at the time. I'm not sure what Volkan. Let's have a quick look. But I remember watching that fight, thinking, yeah, Volkan's gonna knock this fool the hell out. Let's have a look. Oh no, he literally had a massive win streak, and he'd lost for the title against Cormier, which was no shame, losing Daniel Cormier at the start of 2018, none at all, none whatsoever. And then he lost to Anthony Smith, and I mean, yeah, that was a nice win for Smith, but that was probably his best win, in my opinion. Of a guy who maybe not the biggest best name, but the most at the time he beat him, he was mostly relevant and the best name. Either way, we don't need to go into his whole career, but as you can see, his other 3 fight. Oh, look at this. He's had 3-3 fight win streaks. So yeah, Devin Clark, Jimmy Crute, Ryan Spann, not even top 10 worthy. Like maybe in this era, but it's such a weak light heavyweight division. What does top 10 even mean at light heavyweight these days? Either way, get off that. Let's get back to this. I know I'm on a rant there, but I'm just saying, like, he was not. We fought John Jones, but he was never a real serious title contender. That's one last thing. Let me see. When did he fight Jones? Yeah, it was after the Volkan win. So it was the best streak of his career, or the best win of his career, is what gave him the fight with John Jones. But still, I mean, that just shows how slim pickings the division was at the time. And that Gustafsson was, I mean, Gustafsson just fell off a cliff. He was an animal. He was the second best light heavyweight with a bullet for the longest time. But let's get back into this.
On getting a title, and I don't know. There's a lot of crossroads I'm at right now. Like, I still want to fight, but I also told myself a long time ago, I'm not just fighting just to fight. So
seems lost.
If I'm not going to be in a position to win a title, then I need to start the exit plan, which doesn't mean I'm done right now. But that
sounds like it. It sounds. I wasn't going to say this, but just the fact that you just said right there, I'm not saying I'm done and all the rest of it. That sounds like it, because if your heart's not in it 100%, if you're not.
Mm-hmm. This is the Michael Bisping podcast. Believe in me podcast. I think you'd be surprised moment between Joe Rogan and Brendan Schaub. This is literally that I think you'd be surprised moment for them.
The fact that you're even got to question whether or not your heart's fully in it is like a red flag.
I agree with you 100%.
Bisping's almost offended because he had to work so hard, and it was so hard for him to get a title, even though he got it on last minute, kind of weird circumstances. I think Bisping gets peed off when people don't take the sport seriously, especially where he lost an eye. I think it really gets him angry. Bisping's trying to keep his cool, but I think Bisping really gets peed off when people are like, yeah, just, have a little bit of fun with you. And he's like, no, this isn't fun. This is war. To someone like Bisping who's a genuine pit bull, do you know what I mean? This isn't no game to him. Do you know what I mean? And when people talk like that, it's almost talking crap about the sport and the fighters in his mind. I think he gets literally genuinely offended by it.
The problem is I do want to fight. I love fighting. The problem I'm running into mentally is, if I'm not doing it to win a title, am I costing myself more than it's worth? That's the crossroads that I'm at.
Damage.
It's time away from my family, and that's getting harder and harder. And that's when I knew, maybe a couple years ago, like, all right, this tunnel is closing in the near future. Like, this isn't that far away, because before it was always worth it. Like, I knew it sucked and this was terrible and I hate leaving, but like the reward is worth the sacrifice. Right. And I don't know that I feel like that so much anymore. Like, I don't know that it's worth it. If the money's great, but I got plenty of it. And I got a lot of other things I can do, to make money. Yeah. And like, the time away from my family is getting hard. And
so like, and don't be offended when I say this. This is just something, when I hear people say that about the time away from the family, like, I see fighters are like, oh, and I missed a birthday and this and that. I feel like saying, shut the f*** up. Okay, so what, you missed a birthday? Do you know why you missed a birthday? It's because you're off trying to provide a great lifestyle. You're trying to build something. You're trying to build potentially generational wealth. You're trying to provide for your family first and foremost. And so what if you miss a birthday. They're not even going to remember. They're not going to give a what they're going to know is that the father was out there trying to do everything they could to provide for them. There's people that go off and in the army for 9 months at a time and don't see their children, or people that work on oil rigs and stuff like that, you know. So that's only a question that only you can answer. But when I do hear like the birthday ones, I always see fighters going, I've missed so many birthdays. Yeah, you should. It's supposed to be a sacrifice. Nothing in life is supposed to be easy. What you want to be champion of the world, but you want your cake at the same time. There's going to be sacrifices. Again, that's not necessarily directed to you. It's when I see a lot of people say that these days.
Well, I see the same thing. Which I've done and never complained about for the last almost 18 years.
Smith,
this is what I've done my entire adult life. So. And that's where I come to like, okay, if I'm not going to be able to get to a position to fight for a title, or it's going to take so long that I'm going to physically regress further than it's possible to get there.
Damage he's taken now.
Then is it
even 6 months ago? This is just a ridiculous conversation. I mean, Smith has had taken so many beatings. I mean, the John Jones one was pretty bad. The Glover Teixeira one, I mean, he had his tooth knocked out, and just that was one of the worst beatings ever. He's never going to be this. To be fair, I'm surprised Smith doesn't just get knocked out cold in every fight. So you've got to give it to him. He is kind of tough, but like TJ says, he does kind of quit and kind of give up. And they're not exciting fights. I don't think the UFC even want to keep giving him fights if he's going to fight that way. Let's continue a little bit.
Worth it. And like, I don't know the answer to that right now, but I do know that like, I still want to fight. I just don't know how many are left. And if that means I have some fun ones and just do it because I love doing it with no pressure on myself and just fight my ass off and go, I don't know.
See, Bisping put his hand up. He's like, no. Bisping's just triggered. He can't help himself.
I have no idea, but I'm still trying to digest it.
I'm not trying to ambush you here, Anthony, and please don't make it seem, hope it doesn't feel like that. But you said there, take some fun ones. And when we text, you said, I've got to get back to having fun. I hate that. There's not fun ones. It shouldn't be fun.
They're all fun.
It's not about having fun. It's not a fun experience when you're on the floor and Roman Dolidze is pounding your face in.
Yeah, no.
Not a fun experience.
Damn. Smith's nodding, but he's disagreeing, but he's nodding. He's such a nice guy out of the cage, or even in the cage these days. Doesn't want to throw a punch, but yeah, man, let's just go back.
It's not a fun experience when you're on the floor and Roman Dolidze is pounding your face in.
Yeah, no.
Not a fun experience when you're going home and you're depressed and all the rest of it. It's not fun when you go home and you're black and blue and could have surgeries in your neck or you're losing an eye. It's not a fun game. It's a very, very...
See, that's why Bisping's so triggered. He's taking so much damage to get there. He's like, this is not a game. This isn't something to have fun with. Bisping is in chronic pain and just... The amount of surgeries I think he's talking about having, if you watch his podcast like as much or more than I have, you realise the man is just... I just recently was in Colombia getting stem cells put in every bloody orifice of his bloody body, like, do you know what I mean? I mean, his wrist, his neck, his back, his leg, you name it. He's smashed to pieces physically. He has literally sacrificed his body on the altar of greatness, as they say. Let's watch a little bit more of this, and then we'll get into what Bisping said about him not returning, which is quite telling, I think.
Very serious game. It's the most serious game on the planet. You know what I'm saying? It's not about having fun. Yes, the fun is great. You go out there, you win, you're victorious, you jump on top of the cage, all that. Yeah, that's fun. It's fun when you're training with your brothers and you're in the gym and you'll go off with the team. Yeah, that's fun. But there's fun elements, but it's not about having fun. Do you know what I'm saying? And when you said that, I was like,
not agreeing at all.
Dude, it's not about fun. But my advice to you would be just take it one fight at a time. Because
which is what I'm doing.
But have like a full, proper camp and really dedicate yourself to being the best shape you can be. Come in with a popping six-pack, looking, so people can look and visibly go, me, he's in the best shape of his life. Look at this guy. And you know mentally that you've done everything. And when you do that, and if you still can't get the result you're looking for, well, at least you know you've tried. Because in years to come, if you don't do that, then you'll chew yourself up at night. You'll lie there in the middle of the night and go, hey.
And he will do that. But he was never good enough to be champion. That's just the facts. It's like what TJ was saying is just irrelevant. He doesn't have the skills or the physicality, the skills, the athleticism, just all the things you need put together to become champion. He just doesn't have it. And even in this era of the light heavyweight division, he just doesn't have it. He just does not have this. He just does not, and especially at this stage of his career, he just doesn't have it. So let's get into what Bisping said on the podcast relating to Smith leaving. Right, now let's get into Bisping giving the reasons to why Anthony left the podcast. Very interesting.
Before we get into UFC Saudi Arabia, we're going to talk about that. We're going to break it down. We've got a few news stories as well. A lot of people were asking about Anthony Smith and what's happening with the podcast. So just real quick, I wish Anthony nothing but the best of luck. If people watch this show and you're a long
So you know the split straight away with the fact he's like, I wish him the best of luck.
time believer, shall we say, then, you know, Anthony was great on the show. We had some amazing conversations and I really enjoyed them. But with his schedule, with fighting and working ESPN and stuff, he wasn't here some of the time, you know, and other times I would have to get you to fill in. And then
I just want to say this is the weakest, most poor excuse ever, because for one, as we'll find out in a moment, he started his own podcast. So that ain't a reason. And for two, his career's about to end. It's basically over. He's got one more fight. So now is the perfect time to concentrate more on the podcast. But either way, not here, not there. Let's get on with it. They're just a load of rubbish.
You know, he went through a tough time. He lost a friend and a coach, and then he lost his fight. And we were just waiting for him. We were leaving him to it because that would usually be the process. If he lost a fight, he would take a week or two off and stuff like that. And we just never...
Which is quite often, let's be real.
Heard from him, you know, and then obviously I would have you filling in. And then all of a sudden we just saw that he was doing his own podcast somewhere else. So that's it. That's the story. There's no big fallout. There's no drama. There's no beef. I wish him nothing but the best, and I truly mean that.
But he's ignored you, hasn't got hold of you, has just basically ghosted you and started his own podcast. But everything's fine. Okay, I guess Bisping just wants to be a man about it, but I don't know, man. I mean, maybe Smith's missus got in his ear. Maybe she saw the podcast. Maybe Smith got a bit upset after the podcast a few months back about talking about Delidze, and maybe his girlfriend went and watched that segment herself and was like, because you know how women can be a bit slightly more emotional than men. Maybe she watched that and was like, how dare he say this? How dare he make it hurt your feelings, baby? Da, 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 da. And maybe she had something to do with it. Just pure speculation. I don't know, maybe he wasn't making that much money. I mean, who knows what his fee was, what he was getting paid to be on Bisping's podcast. Maybe he crunched the numbers and thought, hang on a minute, I've been on this podcast for ages, I'm still getting a basic little wage. And he might, in his mind, think that he's bringing in most of the views, which he's not. It's probably mainly Bisping. He's way more popular and well known around the world, much more famous. Even in America, I'd say, obviously, being a champion and an English champion, the first English champion. So yeah, maybe it was something to do with that, because the fact he started his own podcast, maybe he thought, right, I've grinded enough on Bisping's podcast. I've, cut my teeth, made myself known to people. I've been on ESPN long enough. I can get my own podcast going and have all the money for myself. Maybe that's something, and I can't blame him if that is it. If Bisping was sort of shortchanging him, I can't really fault him. But I guess we'll never know. With these two types of dudes, they're not the type to air their laundry. I mean, Bisping was short and sweet about it. So I guess that's it. The Believe in Me Smith era of the podcast is over. Let's hope that he doesn't do it with Paul Felder. Nothing against Paul Felder, but like I said, we don't want two fighters. The comedian fighter dynamic was perfect. Man, he should have just stuck with Luis J. Gomez. They should have hashed out their issues. Maybe there wasn't issues. Maybe they were just didn't have time, because I know he's still on the Gas Digital Network, which is run by Lewis, I'm pretty sure. So who knows? But yeah, that's it for this video. Sad to see, but I guess people move on. I just don't like the fact that Anthony Smith ignored him and then started his own podcast. Whatever the situation, I mean, even if they had beef, you should have said, look, man, you've done this to me, you've peed me off, da-da-da-da-da. F you, I'm starting my own podcast, I won't be coming anymore, thank you very much. Maybe he did say that, but I think if he said that, Bisping just wouldn't bring it up, but he wouldn't have said what he said either. So I think what Bisping said, I would take at face value. He has just literally ignored him and started his own podcast, the On Paper podcast, which I think is hilarious. The On Paper podcast. On paper, this podcast is going to do better than Michael Bisping's. And just one last thing I wanted to point out. If Anthony really has just disappeared and blanked Bisping and ignored him and effed him off and just moved on because he's upset about something and he hasn't told Bisping. Kind of like a woman, you're supposed to just guess what you did wrong, even though you have no idea genuinely. If he has done that, it's going to be pretty awkward because Bisping works for UFC, I believe, and Anthony, I think, works for UFC through ESPN or ESPN through UFC, something along those lines. But they're going to be bumping into each other. So, and there's cameras everywhere at these UFC events. If someone sees them even walking in the same direction as each other from 50 meters away, they're going to be whipping their cameras out. So I'm sure it'll come to the... I'm sure we'll find out at least if they did sort of have a falling out. We might not find out any details, but I think we'll find out if there was some sort of falling out at the end, which I think there has been. And yeah, just wanted to say that it's going to be pretty damn awkward that they have to work for the same place. And yeah, man, just before I finish the video, guys, I thought I'd have a little look for the On Paper podcast, and I managed to find it. So let's have a quick gander. This is the first episode. And he's done a smart thing here by getting an easy on the eye, pretty decent looking woman to be his co-host, I guess. And I was going to skim through it to see if I could find anything, but it turns out knocking out a prehistoric fossil.
On paper where the story's told, facts and truth.
Yeah. Another thing I think was one of his favourite moments, like, do you know my name now, Hector? He mentioned that on the Believe in Me podcast, and it sort of fell on deaf ears and no one said anything, and like they didn't give a crap. And I think he felt like, man, that's one of my coolest moments and you guys are just brushing over it. But anyway, comment section tells us all we need to know. This feels like going to the mall and seeing your dad just hanging out with a whole different family that you didn't know about. Not addressing the giant elephant in the room is insane. Bad luck for Anthony. 160 likes. Really poor that you don't give Mike BYM a shout out. This comment section is going to be very fun. Not one mention of BYM. Very interesting. And yeah, it kind of just goes on like that. Bit of a sneaky move. I'm an Anthony fan with it hurts. I'm also a Mike fan. Man. Yeah. So yeah. There you have it, Anthony Smith on paper. On paper, it looks like he's a Snake Bisping. It looks like on paper. So, yeah, it is what it is. So, yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.